Kendall, we want to thank you because when we had our pre-show taping and told you that we were headed to Costa Rica to have a psilocybin ceremony, you generously offered to help with the integration process of it. So that is the second part of our episode. And I'm really grateful for this because I think I don't want to speak for both of us, but I think Dan would agree that integration has always been challenging for the both of us. And we can identify the repeating patterns and scenarios that come up in our lives and typically aren't great at working through them. So I think what we'll do is kind of describe the ceremony and the journey that we individually had. And then we'd love your feedback and you tell us, like, please ask questions or ask more details, like whatever you need. I feel like I'll kind of be pretty much an open book on it.
Okay. Yeah.
And we'll go from there. Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'll just share. Yeah. I appreciate the, just the synchronicities of the timing of that.
I know.
Played out, and grateful and honored that getting to, be a part of the integration and hopefully, support in this way. So it's an honor to be a part of it. I'm really excited to hear about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I wanted to add real quick. When you were mentioning before, when you talked about your own ayahuasca journey, and sort of you mentioned synchronicities and how everything kind of lined up, and it felt like it was just what you were going to do. There wasn't really questions to be asked or a way to figure it out. I feel the exact same way about this trip.
Yeah.
And the way it lined up, the way it worked out, we had the conversation about like, oh, do we do this? Do we not? But it almost felt like it was out of our hands, and that this whole experience was going to happen. It was inevitable. And then I think I'll tie in that, like meeting with you almost right before we left and figuring out like that are you offering to have this integration and to talk about specifically about what we went through. It's just like everything about it is lined up so perfectly. I think it's worth mentioning and worth pointing out, just sort of the way the universe works sometimes, or all the time when you're willing to look for it.
Exactly. The ayahuasquera that I sit with ayahuasca, she describes that like, there's different, synchronicity, or there's different terms for it in different kind of, wisdom traditions or ways of thinking, but she describes it as that's like actually the real magic. Like that is the real magic of life, is being able to get into that state where you're, just the clarity of like listening, and then you can see how everything's interconnected and you can feel how it's interconnected. And it's like, oh, you're on this path, and feeling right. I mean, a lot of times I think in our experience, it's like getting goosebumps or getting that, like, oh, you can feel that you're in that moment because there's something there that like in our normal everyday experience in this culture we're disconnected from, but it's like that's the real magic. That's how she describes it. That's always resonated with me. Yeah.
So technically this was my third time taking psilocybin, but not as large of a dose as I did in the ceremony. And the first time I did it, Dan and I did it very intentionally. We set an intention. We had like a tea ceremony, and then we went to a park, and it basically, as he described, I felt connected to everything. Like there was no separation between me and the grass that I was laying on. I pretty much had my eyes open the entire time, but just seeing beautiful cloud formations and like having this blissful experience. There was no integration kind of after that, though. I mean, I didn't really think anything of it, to be honest. And the second time we took it was a much smaller dose. I would qualify it as a microdose.
What was the dosing that first time in the park? Just curious. How much you guys took?
I took less. I probably took just under a gram the first that I took in the park. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you must have taken at least like 2 grams.
Close to maybe like 1.5 or a little over. It wasn't that much.
Yeah. And so for this ceremony, I took just under 2 grams in Costa Rica. And kind of like you were explaining, like within the ceremony setting, as you know it, the medicine woman did offer like an opportunity to have a second dose if we wanted to, which I did. That's why I started with 1.1, and then she gave me just under 1 the second time that I went up. So basically, like, the container that was set, the entire wellness retreat that we were on was basically leading up to the ceremony. There was a lot of deep healing, a lot of work. And I'm so grateful that you listened to the podcast of recapping this year, because a big part of being in Costa Rica was releasing and letting go. That's a huge theme, is specifically within the mushroom ceremony. But I have been painstakingly like debilitated with sadness and grief since my cousin's passing, really for like the past 18 months, because my stepbrother passed away last June. And then my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer, and that just within, like, she had 6 major surgeries within like less than a year. And then to wrap up that year, and this year my cousin died. I didn't think so much could happen in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And to see this trip and this journey changed me is an understatement. And I can already feel my ego trying to figure out what's going on. But my main intention was twofold going into the ceremony, which we, as a group discussed during the opening ceremony. And for me, it was to let go specifically of the sadness and the grief that I was feeling, but also letting go of the conditioning and program that I received, that basically made me who I am, that I'm not anymore. It's gotten me to this point, and I did it for survival, but it's no longer serving me, and I need to let that go. And so when we began, I cried through like the opening ceremony, like just tears streaming on my face. So in all honesty, Kendall, like I thought I was gonna go in and cry for this 8-hour ceremony. Like that was my anticipation. I need to release this grief. Like I'm just gonna sit and lay on my bed and cry.
Yeah.
And when the first dose was given, we basically did an silent hour meditation as the mushrooms, the medicine is working. And I sat for a little bit, laid down. And as I laid down, when you close your eyes, it's thinner, you see a lot. And I was basically really just seeing a bunch of colors, a bunch of geometric shapes, lots of faces, but none that I recognize. All that I can describe them as is indigenous people. I didn't feel a connection to them. I just felt like a warm presence. Like I wasn't scared. I was just in it. I felt really, really sad the entire time, but was fighting back tears within that hour. And so when the medicine woman called us, okay, the hour is up. Is there anybody who would like to, enhance their dose, take a little bit more? I was the first one to get up because I kept hearing, go deeper, go deeper. Mm-hmm. So I knelt down, and within the ceremony container, you've got the medicine woman and you have the people who she's working with. There were 5 other people that was working with her. There was a firekeeper that basically all her job was to keep the fire going if we wanted to go near the fire. There was a musician who was from Costa Rica, so from the land. And then there were technically 2 other people, but then the person who was facilitating the wellness retreat was part of the group just to hold space, to be there, to, So when I knelt down in front of the medicine woman, she was asking how I was doing and whatnot. And then the musician who was from Costa Rica knelt down next to me. And you know how within the ceremony space, like they make it very, very clear. You do not speak to anybody. You do not touch anybody. Like this is an individual journey. Like if you need help, you raise your hand if you need assistance in whatever matter. So when he knelt down in front of me, he asked how I was doing. How are you doing? And you're in it, like you're feeling stuff. And I was like, I'm good. And he like looked at me. He was like, what does good mean? And I was like, and then the tears just start coming. I'm fighting back tears. And they're like, why? Like cry. This is what this is here for. And I was like, but I'm so tired of crying. Like I cry all day, every day. I don't want to cry anymore. And the gentleman reached out his hand And I like was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I know this is an offering, but I'm not supposed to touch you. But I just placed my hand on his, and he looked me dead in the eye, and he was like, leave it here. Leave your sadness, leave it to the land. We're happy to take it from you.
Wow.
And just a rush went over my body. And I was like, whoa. I instantly like felt the energy of like dissolution. Like there was no sadness. So I went back to the bed. I took the second dose and I began laying down. And then I could hear other people like getting up, and I just felt like it wasn't an inward journey anymore. I kept getting like, let us do the work, meaning like the mushrooms, let us do the work, get up and go be in nature. And I had heard Dan was to the bed to the left of me. I heard him get up too. So I knew he was out there. So I was like, all right, like I'll walk out. I'll see if he wants company or not. And when I walked out, I just was like, I like had a dress on and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I just felt so happy. And we sat around the fire, which was beautiful. And the majority of people were in the ceremony space, still laying in the bed at this time. And the firekeeper was there. Dan and I walked over. So it was just the two of us and her. And she had tobacco, like real tobacco that wasn't ground or anything, like sacred tobacco that was like prayed over. And she described it as like, this is like for you to release and ask your ancestors if you need help with anything like moving forward. And I was like, ooh, okay. And it's like typically taken with like your left hand and like you pray over it and then you like lend it to the fire to like let go and release.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. So I like took the hand, I like set the intention of like asking like the generations before me to assist with letting go of the patterns that brought me to where I am, specifically with like my family, because there has been such a like lack mentality, anxiety, like culture around religion and stuff that I'm trying to pave my own way, but I feel I don't know how to because it's like a debilitating feeling that I'm letting my family down, debilitating. And my cousin passing, when she passed 6 months ago, her and I are kind of like the black sheep of the family. They would never say that about us, but we're the ones that like moved away, that didn't like conform to Catholicism. Like we believe different things. We like to expand our consciousness, to grow, to think outside the box. And she kind of left me this container of, she did it, so it was like okay for me to do it. So like her not being here any longer, I don't have that person that I can like lean on and talk through this. And it's like, now I feel like the torch is being handed to me and I don't know what to do with it. And that was a huge thing, kind of wrapping up the ceremony as well. And like my grandmother coming to me when I looked in the mirror, because you know how crazy that can be when you look in a mirror.
Yeah.
And yeah, she just like saying to me, like, lead the way.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And again, it's like my ego. I'm trying to figure out like, lead the way. How? I don't know how. Can you just tell me how to do it?
Yeah.
And so it was beautiful. And I'm so grateful to have it because I laughed so much and I had such a great time and I needed it. Like I haven't laughed like that in 18 months and it just felt so good. And there was a portion kind of in the middle of the journey when I was sitting there. It was, Kendall, can I tell you, it was blazing hot in Costa Rica, in a fire. Like there's nothing over us. Within the ceremony space, it was like a hanger. There was like a roof over it, but we're sitting in the Costa Rican sun. It had to be.
It was during the day? It was a day ceremony?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow.
It began at 11 a.m. Yeah. So I'm just dripping sweat, which I know also was probably a purge in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
They gave me like a little umbrella and that was like my sanctuary. Like I was like leaning on it. And at one point it was Dan and I sitting there and then another girl had come out of the ceremony space and I was like looking out back towards the grassy area And I was just staring there probably for a couple minutes, don't know how long. And she was sitting next to me and intuitively looked at me and said, say it, Elise, say what you're thinking.
Mm.
And I was like, I feel really guilty for having fun right now.
Mm. Yeah.
And I was like, and I don't know why. And the firekeeper, who also has been working with psilocybin, she said, for over 34 years, she was dropping some really good wisdom when we needed it.
I bet.
But she like looked at me, she's like, that's conditioning, dive into that. Like, why don't you want to have fun? And I was like, I don't know. But I think as I think about that, there has been, well, I feel like I can't have fun during this period of like grief.
Right.
But also there's a big part of me and a big part of the generational kind of familial ties to being a caretaker. That's like, my grandmother was the matriarch of our family. She took care of everyone. And I feel I've taken on that role for sure over this 18 months where I'm now taking care of my mother. When my cousin died, I was there for her death. And then Dan and I journeyed back to Colorado to help them. Like, I help others. And I don't know how to help myself. I feel like I've lost the fun. Like I lost how to have fun in life. Like, I can't enjoy it anymore because it's like this staunch, strict, be the person who is going to take care of everybody else. Yeah. And then don't ask for what I need in return. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd say that was pretty much the journey in a nutshell. I left a lot there for sure. I didn't realize how quickly the sadness left me. I said to Dan, like, could it have been that simple? Like, it seemed like that was the easy part. And then just like the kind of generational things that I am needing to let go of, the conditioning, the people pleaser, always taking care of everybody. And now having this almost task in breaking the generational traumas moving forward.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have one question that, just for context, I was curious, maybe should ask. How many participants were in the ceremony? There
were 10 of us.
Okay. Just curious of the,
yeah. 10 of us. Yeah. And then like the medicine woman and her team did take it, but lower doses so that they could.
Right.
Yeah. So there was 10 of us.
Okay. Yeah. Well, depending upon what feels best for the two of you, we can either
you
wants to share, and then maybe
give you time to think about
that works.
Yeah. Either way, whatever feels best for the two of you is fine for me.
Yeah. I'll share my experience. So I came in to the ceremony and to really the week in general with the the clear intention I had was of making that ceremony or allowing that ceremony to be a rite of passage. But I feel like for the last 10 years, and then progressively more and more, I've been on this journey of self-development and spiritual evolution and just like personal evolution. And I think I've always been a little bit afraid to let go of who I used to be or who I thought I was supposed to be. So as I learned new things and as I've changed, I think I've still been afraid to fully step into the new version of myself. And I think it's just especially with this past year, things have gotten exponentially faster and faster. It's becoming inevitable that I have to change. It's just happening. So it's going to be a lot easier if I can make a clean cut from who I thought I was supposed to be or who people expected me to be. So that was really my main intention going into the ceremony and kind of figuring out how to just be the version of myself that I know I am and not worrying about who I expected to be or anyone else expected me to be.
Yeah.
And then so like Elisa described, when we took the medicine, the first hour was just like a silent meditation. And I feel I went pretty deep, pretty fast. I saw a lot of things. A big theme that had kind of come up for me throughout the week. I saw back up. Part of my issue in taking this step and kind of becoming the person I know I am has been, I think, fear and a lot of like the imposter syndrome. And I think I know a lot of things, but then also like, what if I don't? What if I sound stupid? What if I'm not ready for this role, kind of thing? And a lot of fear in leading and coaching people, and even just having a podcast and like who am I to talk about this kind of thing? These ideas always creep up. And a big theme that had kind of come up throughout the week for me was that I am capable and I'm like protected, that I have that there's a lot going on other levels and other dimensions. It's not just me. I'm never alone in this. I'm protected. And that was one of the first things that I saw as I kind of had the opportunity to look behind the veil, was like generations and generations of like powerful, divine feminine energy, and just generations of what seemed in the moment to feel like sort of like medicine women praying over me and protecting me. And it was, I could see across time. I know people listening, this might sound crazy, but I could see that like the dimension of time was all stacked on top of each other, and these women were shoulder to shoulder across generations protecting me, and I was on one side and they were praying over me, and on the other side was, whatever I was afraid of, that they were keeping it away, and that there was this buffer. And it was just such a beautiful and empowering experience to like a capital K, like knowing that no matter what I did, I was never on my own, and it was going to be fine because I'm protected.
Right.
And then I kept kind of coming back and forth. It would be this most beautiful, vivid, powerful image, and then I'd be like, oh, I wonder what's going on in the real world. And I'd open my eyes, and I'd be like, it's okay. There's everybody's still here. I love everybody, and just immense feelings of like love for everybody. But then I'd be like, well, but I need to go back and see if they're still there. And I'd close my eyes, and it would be this scene again, and these like women praying over me, or I felt like I was in artwork of like Central American, South American artwork, indigenous, all the like geometry, and these like powerful geometries, like connecting all the different elements and the trees and the people and the animals, and it's just in it. And it was so beautiful. And then I'd come back out and I'd look, everybody's still here, and I'd go back in, and then I felt like I went into like a deeper or a higher dimension, where I felt like I was in a like Alex Gray artwork, where it was all these beautiful shapes, but then also were these enormous beings that the only word I could have for them was like gods. And it was the same feeling, where it was like, first it was these like the third dimension, like these powerful women and the divine feminine, like praying over me and protecting me. And then I was in this higher dimension of like the divine masculine, and there were these just big, they look like statues, but they're enormous. And I was just consciousness working my way through all these shapes. And it was like, they weren't even acknowledging me, but they were so stoic and strong. They're like, wow, even on this level, I'm protected and I'm safe. And, these beings are watching out for me. So there's like all these, like, just this undescribable feeling of I'm safe and I'm protected and I'm okay and I can do anything. And that it's like the things that I think, like, I'd open my eyes and like, oh, this is what I think is the real world. And I know that there's these other dimensions there. So it's like really put things in perspective from that aspect. And then, like Elise had mentioned, I got up and went, like, right after I took the second dose, I went and sat down for like a minute. And I was like, this isn't doing it anymore. I need to be outside. And I went out by myself. I was the first one that had left the ceremonial area.
And what was the dosing that you did from the first and the
I had taken 3 grams to start. Okay. And then I went back and probably ended up taking about 2 more grams.
Okay.
So I was feeling pretty good. And I went outside, and it was the same as was now like awake, but I was walking around and I felt like I was like walking through all the geometry and the shapes and the interconnectedness of everything. And I was like in the flower of life, and on like a fractal level of looking down, you see a little flower of life, but then I realized that flower was just one of the circles and a bigger flower, and just, it was everything. And it was like really, really comforting and beautiful. And I went out and I looked, there's this big, huge tree. It's just like big, beautiful tree. And as I looked at it, I saw that like that was, if you see it as a circle, it was like the tree of life, but it was in the flower of life, and everything was so interconnected, and there were birds in the trees and the ground. I was just sitting watching it. And I felt like, this is so beautiful. And then I had like this knowing of, it's only beautiful because you are. Any beauty that you see in the world is just a reflection of who you are. And it really shook me, because I feel like I had always wanted to be seen as beautiful. And like, not like a attractive or like sexual, just like beautiful in the way that I saw that tree.
Yeah.
And then I was like so engrossed in the feeling, like if you see that beauty, that's what you are. And then so I was just sitting there like in that, and I like start crying, and I went pretty deep into like, not even feeling bad about that I had never allowed myself to feel that, or that I'd been searching for that and it wasn't there. But I was just really emotional about the experience. And then I started thinking about Elise, and I think it's listening to her explain her experience is interesting, because as I was out there, I started thinking like, oh, I wonder if Elise is okay. Like, I need to go check on her. And then I stopped myself. I'm like, don't go check on her. You need to be alone, because she needs to be alone. And I started like really worrying about, is she better off without me? And it's really interesting, like based on her talking about how she's always the caretaker. So I'm like, I was sitting out there, I'm like, I know that I'm better with her, but is she better with me? Was like all that I could think about, and like trying to really like feel into. And I guess I just decided, like, if she's better off alone, then I'm gonna leave her alone and let her be. Yeah. And I mean, time, I don't understand time at that point, but seconds later, I heard her behind me calling my name, and she was like, is it okay if I come over here? And it was just like, fuck. I said, okay, good. I guess maybe she does want me here. Like, maybe she is better with me. And then kind of from that moment, like she said, like we went over to the fire and had an amazing time, had so much fun. But for the rest of the day, for like, it must have been the next 5 hours, I felt every emotion simultaneously.
Yes, like I need, like I have to laugh about it, because it's also like, I'm so grateful. I was saying to this one in the closing ceremony, when we were talking about it, like a part of me also was so grateful that I did get up and didn't spend the entire day like laying on the bed, because I was able to witness Dan with so many emotions. He's not typically one who shows a lot of emotions, and he was feeling everything. I mean, like hysterically crying, hysterically laughing, happy, sad, content, staring, like everything all at once, like pouring out of him.
Parenting can be stressful and even overwhelming, especially if you have an overly sensitive child. What if there was a way to better understand, guide, and nurture your child's unique sensitivity and emotional intelligence to set them up for success on their developmental journey? Rooted Rhythm's signature course, Tuned In, offers a transformational process for parents of highly sensitive, super feeling, wise, and empathetic children. You know, Dan and I don't have children of our own, but we were both highly sensitive children growing up. And we know firsthand how difficult it can be to feel and process emotions in a productive and constructive way at such a young age. Recently, having gone through the Tuned In course, we both took away so much valuable information and practical tools we could utilize to reparent ourselves and to understand how to better use our sensitive nature to deepen our connection to ourselves as well as the world around us. The Tuned In course teaches parents concrete skills to meet their sensitive kids' needs in moments of intensity, increases their ability to connect deeply with their children, and supports a process of inner healing to shift how they relate to parenting. Each module offers unique grounding and embodiment meditations, lectures full of both evidence-based and practical content, and supplementary exercises to support in the implementation of new skills. Parents who have taken this course report walking away from the experience feeling relaxed in their being and confident to parent their children in a way that both feels most true to them as a parent, as well as most supportive for their children. If this resonates with you as a parent or simply for yourself, we are excited to offer our listeners $100 off of this transformational course. Click the link in our show notes, which goes directly to the Rooted Rhythm Tuned In course website, and enter the discount code DEEP Life, all one word, to receive $100 off of the Tuned In course.
Yeah. So that was it. And it was really, really interesting because I could somewhat, I could grasp what was happening. Because like I always say, everything is everything. And I feel like slowly over the years, as I've been saying everything is everything, I've understood it more and more and more.
Yeah. And
I think I realized in that moment, it was like everything is like within every moment, every thought, everything that exists contains everything. And within every moment, I felt like unbelievable sadness, and I was bawling my eyes out, but at the same time, like it wasn't like I cried until I laughed or laughed until I cried. I was laughing as I cried. It was like, oh, okay, so this moment exists, like contains all the sadness, all the joy, all the bliss, all the understanding, all the confusion. And I could really, really like comprehend that as I was feeling it. Wow. And it really, really helped to like, because I had the issue of like, how can I be this version of myself when other people expect me to be this other version? And it's like, oh, I don't need to necessarily choose. I can let that one die and still like transcend and include and still have everything. I'm not letting people down by being one version of myself. It's all there. And I get to choose, and I get to choose in every moment exactly how I want to show up. And it was like very, very clear. And I feel like once I had that, it was like, let's just have a great time. And we had so much fun for hours.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, but I loved it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Wow. I'm appreciating you guys doing that experience together and how, having the components of it that were your own individual journeys, and then the moments of, your relationship together, that, weaving in and out, and just that adds a layer of complexity, which even saying that is kind of like, right. I mean, how do you compare complexity in those experiences? But just that relational piece, that's amazing and like beautiful that you were able to have that, to do it together in that way, and to have it weaved throughout. And to get to witness each other in the different ways that you described, right? In your own internal experience with the relationship, but then to get to see, like at least to get to see Dan outwardly express emotion in a way that, maybe you rarely, if ever, get to see, just like what a gift that is. And I can imagine, Dan, as you're describing it, it was a gift for you to get to be able to feel it and express it and be seen and witnessed. Not only by everyone there, but especially by Elise. Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing that without her. Or at least that time. Like it seemed. But like I was saying before, like the way everything came together like that absolutely had to be a part of it.
Yeah. And just, from what I do know about the two of you from listening from our conversation before and listening to some of your podcasts of just the journey that you guys have been on and the relational dynamics of like, right, how in relationship it can be, I think for a lot of people, like Ram Dass speaks on this and he calls it like the yoga of relationship. And, you know, again, not for everyone, but for a lot of people through their personal relationships, maybe their primary romantic relationship, how that could be oftentimes is maybe like the most powerful container and catalyst for our own personal growth in the, you know, in that container, because like this is the person that gets to see parts of you that no one else does, right? On the beautiful, deep, you know, maybe what we would classify as positive, and I think to more of the like shadow parts. That's like, I don't want anyone to see this, but like in this relationship, the vulnerability that happens. Yeah, hearing the two of you talk about some of that in the podcast of maybe the parts I'm remembering as more of a little bit more from like it's always wrapped in with emotion and feelings, right? But like from the psychological piece, like awareness of like, oh, this was my ego.
Yeah.
And yourself that's showing up. And I see how that's making, you know, causing me to project something on my partner. But then deepening in an experience like this, it's like, oh, you really get to like go into different layers in a felt sense. That's just like, I don't know, such a beautiful compliment and to maybe some of those other pieces that you guys, I've heard you guys talk about. Yeah. What have you seen? What have you guys, curious, like in your experience post the journey, just kind of more in the relational dynamic piece. How long have you guys been back now since the journey?
A little over a week. We got back last Tuesday.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So, yeah, just about a week. Yeah.
Yeah. How has that been? How have you seen that? Maybe the integration, if we're just looking at more like the relational component.
I think we have a lot more ideas. And I mean that by like creative ideas on where we want to take our business. Relation-wise, I feel like I kind of said, like I needed to, not needed, but like I'm grateful to have watched him go through the experience there, because not that it's been challenging watching him kind of like go 10 feet and then go 10 feet back over the past, 10 years. But I always like, he's one of the smartest people I know. And like, I know this like capital K. So to have him explain what he did and saw throughout that journey is just like, yeah, like I knew that. So I think that maybe has been reassuring for him. And also, I think it just like, we leveled up in our relationship a little bit more after this experience. Like it was really challenging leaving on that last day. Like we were crying. It was like, we left a lot there. And I feel like just as there have been so many different versions of ourselves throughout this entire relationship of 19 years, we're just leaving like two people behind that aren't serving us. And we're like stepping into the higher versions of ourselves that are going to expand in like all areas, relationship, business, respect, consciousness. So I think that has been like exciting to see. I also think kind of like you were saying after your ayahuasca journey, like got back to life. It's like, I think we're doing too much too fast. Like we're kind of both recovering from like a cold, our body telling us to like slow down and integrate what we just learned. But there's like much more of an excited aspect to this. Like it feels different. Like it's a feeling of like different. Like I feel I can already see Dan's like power emerging and like stepping into like this, not that he's not masculine, but more of like the masculine energy, but also like has tapped into like that feminine aspect of knowing when he needs to be vulnerable or share what he needs to share.
Yeah, I'm appreciating, I know you guys had my wife, Sophie, as a previous guest, and just, parallels in many ways of what you're sharing of that I've heard Sophie voice in some similarities of like in our journey together of times where, her naming that like her experience of it, me kind of like almost kind of being in my own way, right? Which we all do that in different ways.
Yes.
And then, usually, not always, but usually, you know, after like psychedelic experiences, sometimes, you know, other just like profound experiences where then I'm like experiencing when she's kind of like, that's what I've, you know, like been trying to tell you like all along. And I'm like, oh, now I feel it. Now I like believe it in myself in a way that, right. And I think it's easier, like maybe in the, you described like your, the caretaking role where it's a lot easier to, for us to put love and devotion and service into someone else and to see that and then see their higher self. And how, you know, how difficult it can be for us to see that and honor that in ourselves sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest things too, is there was a caregiver aspect to our relationship as well as our business. Oh, I'll do this if he feels uncomfortable doing this. Like, I'll handle that. I'll handle this, or I'll send these emails. I'll do the marketing. I'll do this, this, and this. And I feel I was almost putting too much control, which in turn was resisting his own creative expression that he needed to do, where I thought I was like helping him, but I think I was really just hindering him from moving forward. So that has been a big realization as well. It's like, I'm relinquishing control and I'm here to support you. I said that to him, whatever you need, you ask for, and I'm there, but I'm not going to step in any longer because he knows, he knows what he needs to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything, Dan, for like around this particular?
Like, I definitely agree with that. I think that, because I don't want to say like, we've always been really supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And like, I want to say we're more supportive now, but it's just a different, I think we have a different understanding of how to support one another.
Yeah.
If I might chime in. I think like throughout this relationship, we've been very codependent. I think that's like the word you're trying to use, where now it's like, we're still together, but we're stepping into our own and just creating a better container of support as opposed to depending so much on one another.
Yeah.
I think. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. I can't figure out like the words. Like, I want to be a version of myself that allows you to be a better version of yourself without getting too involved or meddling or trying to turn you into something or use you in any way. From like, we can both be the best version of ourselves, which will in turn make our relationship the best version of our relationship, rather than, like you said, like rather than the codependent filling of roles that we had maybe done before.
Yeah. And the gift of that experience for you guys to, you know, a shared experience of tapping into your, you know, highest version of yourselves and kind of that almost like divine experience, right? To that, just seeing that, like, oh, that just how that could naturally then like allows for a deeper understanding and appreciation of each other. And just like you're saying, I'm seeing that like the need for the, you know, boundaries and creating each other's space so you can each kind of grow together but separately. I'll maybe, I don't know if you guys like show notes that you do, I'll send it afterwards because I'm definitely gonna like butcher the beauty of the whole quote, but yes, we do show notes. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran is a book that has been it's a beautiful story, and there's different sections, and it's kind of really like poetry. And one of the sections, the one that that's in this moment thinking of is it's on relationships is what it's called, that little chapter. And basically he speaks to this by saying like, right, just as the, you know, like oak trees they don't like grow right next to each other. They have to have like the room for their roots, right? So it would not serve its own individual growth and hinder, it wouldn't be able to if they were too close together. So like that balance of, right, of allowing yourself the space to fully be each other while in relationship, like, just that balance there. That's what came to mind when you guys were sharing.
That's very cool. Thank you.
I'll send that to include it.
Yes, please do. We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
It's interesting because we haven't really, I was just saying, like, we haven't really discussed this. We've had conversations about like what we experienced. We haven't really talked about sort of like how it's affecting our relationship.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to like say these things out loud and start talking about it. And
Yeah.
it's like wheels are turning. And it's like every time I talk about this or journal about it, like it makes more and more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's maybe an important thing to note, from what a lot of anecdotal evidence from people over time, but then, for those of us that are also find the importance and appreciate more of the scientific, validation in the studies with high dose psilocybin that Johns Hopkins has done, and a lot of it around, some of those around end of life, but I think the particular one I'm thinking of, it was, high dose. So it was like, I believe 5 grams. And, years after those studies, they found a very high percentage, 80 to 90%, said that experience was one of the top 2 or 3 most profound experiences of their life, including birth of a child, marrying their loved one, death of a family member, and just how, years later, when they're doing the follow-up research of these clinical trials and these studies, a very high percentage as well, just saying that, after, the integration piece, like after a year, I'm having like profound insights and profound things, like it landing of like, 2 weeks after, there was this area that I was really like focused on how amazing it was, but a year later, then there was a new, just another layer that came to the surface of the importance of the experience. So just wanting to name that, like you guys are a week out, which still very fresh. I can imagine there'll be layers and layers that'll unfold over time as part of the integration process.
That makes sense for sure. Do you have any tips as when we kind of hit light bulb moments, or just like, is it best to journal? Is it best to talk about it, meditate? I did hear that it's almost like kind of like a somatic, like feel what part of your body is being affected by, whether it be like a trigger or a light bulb moment or something, because that's going to be like an indicator on how to work through what needs to be worked through as in the body sense. Because I heard someone say, which I think is really interesting, like integration needs to be felt more than thought of, because like your mind is your ego. It's trying to, either trick you or trying to make something more complicated. But if your body's not following along, it's not going to integrate the feelings with it. And that really is like, oh, okay. Makes sense.
I think that's beautiful advice of we're all individuals, and we all, maybe the journey is gonna, integration processes will look differently for each person, but I do think there's some kind of, from a macro lens, some advice that under that umbrella, like, right, it may be like a little bit more in one area, it resonates for you, at least as compared to Dan, and each of you trusting the journey in that way. But I think that idea, especially for as Westerners having these experiences, we tend to err on the side of individualizing it, maybe to an extent that maybe could get out of balance, and psychological, going deep onto the mind side of it, which is very important. We need that aspect. That's the world that we're living in. And I think that advice of the reminder to shifting out of that maybe a little more often, coming back into our body, getting back out into nature, especially since the 2 of yours journey was, much of it was, there was a lot of outward, a lot of like being in nature. Any chance that you can get to, as simple as going to a park and sitting on the ground and, meditating that way, being in nature. And again, we talked about, some of it sounds pretty simple, but I think that's really the wisdom in a lot of these lessons, that it is simple. We complicate things with our Western minds, which is beautiful. It allows us to create things and do, create things out of our minds that are just just amazing. And balance that by simplifying and coming back to nature, coming back to our being with our physical body in a simple way. I think that's a great advice.
That completely makes sense and super helpful. Thank you for allowing us to have this container to explain this journey to you and for listening as well. We really haven't, other than the group that we were in, and Dan's brother and his girlfriend, because they understand our journey and have done psilocybin journeys as well. We haven't really spoken about it. So I'm glad. It's also, I wanted to share it on the podcast because like you were saying, it is, I am going to use the word safe. Like it is safe. Like I felt completely, like good in it. It wasn't scary, but I also understand like it's not for everybody. Like I was saying before, like if I had tried to do this 5 years ago, where I was so much in my head, had so much anxiety, I certainly, like a disclaimer, you could probably talk about that a little bit more, but you almost know when you're ready for it.
Yeah.
Like I'm asking to continuously grow, to release traumas, to release these pains. Like it's uncomfortable and shitty when it comes up, but I know that it's going to make me feel exponentially better after that period of.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think that's an important, thank you for bringing that in. Of just the, maybe as I spoke to a little bit in the first episode around, that just to be careful, like it's can be really easy to fall into the mindset. I did this immediately, kind of immediately after doing ayahuasca for the first time, that was like, everyone needs to do this. If everyone did this right now, the world would be healed, right? That these experiences and these medicines, they're not a panacea. It's not going to solve everyone's issues. It's not for everyone. And the timing, trusting the timing, in your life of that piece of as best as you can, of like knowing when it's time to be ready, not trying to force, I want to do another ceremony because I'm chasing an experience. Because I mean, being here in Colorado, it's very exciting. The times we're in, last fall, we passed Prop 122, which decriminalized psilocybin statewide. Also, as part of that bill, provides, it's in the works. They're putting together the regulatory framework for, on a state level, being able to access psilocybin with a therapist. So as a therapist, I'd be able to get psilocybin. They don't have it worked out yet, but I would be able to procure it through the state, offer sessions as a licensed therapist with clients. In addition to psilocybin, there was a handful of other plant medicines that were part of that. So that's in the works. It passed last fall. I don't know the timeline. Hopefully within another year, they'll have all that in place and we'll see what that looks like. But so we're in this really exciting and interesting gray area in Colorado where we've always had a really robust underground scene of people guiding others with anything. There's, I think, ways that it's being done that is amazing, and I think fully in integrity. Maybe other ways where there's times where, at least personally, where I kind of feel like, oh, that's something about this particular ceremony or the way it's being held or the energy of the people holding the space, something doesn't quite feel, feels like maybe out of integrity, at least for me to participate or not. And I've firsthand known of people who have had psychedelic experiences. And maybe I'll preface this, not just with underground psilocybin. This also for sure can happen in a, fully above board, fully legal, say, ketamine session. It's not unusual for people to have a difficult time integrating an experience, especially if they're ungrounded going into the experience. And, people who have a history personally or in their family line of psychosis, of bipolar, it can, stepping into these states that, pull you out of your ego and pull you out of this consensus reality. If you don't have a strong foundation in your own ego and your own experience, it can put you further into just psychosis or challenging experiences. And I've firsthand seen that happen. And so just to name, like, maybe coming back to that conversation of, these are very, very powerful tools, powerful substances that, approaching them with reverence, with respect, with caution at times, really trying to, on your own, and getting guidance from people you trust, from people who are, have experience guiding others, getting insight and support around, is this the right time for me to step into this experience? Because like with anything else, we can easily fall into, maybe from looking at it like Buddhist terms, like this feeling of like grasping of like, I want to have this experience, so I'm going to overextend myself to have it. That it always doesn't turn out well in the short term for people, right? It can be
Sure.
very unstabilizing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that has really shifted my perspective with psilocybin and other things, I feel probably with ketamine as well, the way that you're describing it, is like, it is a medicine. Like, mushrooms are highly intelligent. They're not going to give you what you want. They're going to give you what you need.
Yeah.
And I really, like, I found that when I went in, like I said, I thought I was going to cry for 8 hours, but I didn't need that. I've cried for 6 months. I needed to laugh. And I needed to see things that I saw. And I think that having that intention and almost switching the language really on how we perceive these things, as opposed to the dogma around them being dangerous or scary, or, oh my gosh, like demons are going to come at, like, it's medicine. Like, if you know that it's helping your body, it's literally rewiring your brain, and you're coming out of it a better version of yourself. That's so much more powerful than going in with the fear of, like I'm saying, the dogma around maybe the stigma that's been attached to them too long.
Yeah. I mean, mushrooms, especially, I think, right? It's just the role that they play in nature as, creating the mycelial network that connects, right?
Connects everything.
Trees, connects everything, the death and decomposition, kind of role that they play. I think it's not surprising that is, pretty reliably the experience that people have, in the connection to oneness. Like, oh yeah, it is a web that's all connected.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Kendall, you are a blessing. I am so grateful every day that the universe brought us Sophie and you to have in our lives, even though we are not neighbors, we're virtual neighbors. Before we wrap up here, is there anything, even kind of going from the first part, that you want to touch upon, or anything that you feel we missed, or that is anything that we didn't touch upon? We covered a lot in both episodes.
Yeah. No, I mean, first of all, thank you both as well. I really so grateful to be connected with both of you and get to have this conversation. And I hope and trust that it's helpful for people that listen on their journey. And the connection you guys having Sophie on your podcast, and just appreciating that all the layers of these connections. No, I mean, I guess if maybe in terms of, for people who are, interested in.
I was going to say, if we could,
psychedelic
we'll put your website in the show notes for sure.
I know I'm based in Colorado. So if somebody, if you're in Colorado, if you're a resident of Colorado and seeking therapy, seeking ketamine assisted psychotherapy, or if you have, loved ones who are in Colorado who I can support, don't hesitate to send them my way. I mean, I really enjoy, if it's a situation where, for whatever reason, like hopefully, or maybe we're a great fit, and if not, being kind of in that spirit of mushrooms, being like a connector, helping connect people with. Sometimes I have a consultation with an amazing person, and we're not quite the right fit at this time. Like, I think there's someone else who could like maybe support them most optimally. I know a lot of people who have amazing gifts and areas of focus that I can help connect with as well. And even outside of that, if you're not in Colorado, but if you're struggling, or if you're just looking for maybe guidance and support in any way, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always more than happy to see what I could do. Maybe I know someone in your state. Maybe there's, as the two of you experience, there's a lot of amazing options for going to retreats out of the country where it's fully legal, and where that, and where there's amazing people holding retreats in that way. And just in terms of the support and integration piece, I think that both of you maybe spoke to a little bit of what's happening for you, of the importance of like layers of support. I always, I'm biased, but I always, recommend having that one-on-one support with a therapist. Is such an important, can be a profound tool for people in certain parts of their journey to provide a step out of, their day-to-day lives and relationships, and have a touch point of someone there who's supporting them in that way. Then having, the importance of having personal relationships, whether that's hopefully like a healthy relationship with your partner, friend network, larger community, especially if you're diving into psychedelic experiences, finding support from people who can, provide in a caring way. There's lots of amazing groups you can find online now, that a lot of them free, some of them pretty inexpensive, of like finding group support for psychedelic integration. I always talk with clients about that, of like, in addition to our one-on-one stuff we're doing, let's help you have layers of support in community is so important, as you guys experience doing a ceremony in community, right? There's this balance of doing a one-on-one ketamine session can be amazing and profound and helpful. And there's some form of evolution of expanding that to like a group ketamine session, or a group, whether that's just integration and experientially, like, right, we're not meant to be just one-on-one in our relationships, as humans. So finding that balance of support at a community level. There's always, so if people are struggling, feeling alone, like, there's reach out, even if it's uncomfortable. And I'm honored to be like, if I can provide that role for somebody too, if anybody in any form, just reach out on my website and we can have a conversation about finding the support for you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kendall, for sure. Amazing. What a fabulous two talks. We will certainly keep you posted with our integration as we journey forward too. I'm confident this isn't the last time we'll be speaking, and we're very happy to continue this relationship. And again, just deeply grateful for having you on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you both. I'm really grateful as well. I'm looking forward to, hearing how the continued integration goes. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.